Today the church celebrates the memorial of St. Catherine of Siena. St. Catherine lived in a very tumultuous time in history. It was a time of plague, a time of great division within the culture, a time of division even within the church with false claims at the papacy, and it was a time of great laxity within religious practice. And yet God provides for His church, and He provided in a powerful way by raising up this wonderful saint, St. Catherine of Siena. She was born in 1347 and had just an intense prayer life as a child within a large family. And at the age of 16, she entered the Third Order Dominicans, the lay branch of the Dominicans, and she spent 3 years in solitude in a room in her parents' house, her family's house. 3 years in solitude. I mean, just imagine that. People have a difficult time with a weekend retreat or with the isolation that we experience in the current crisis, right? But 3 years in solitude, prayer, penance. And in that time, she received all these powerful visions, these mystical visions of Jesus. And in one of the visions, Jesus wedded himself to St. Catherine. She had a sort of spiritual marriage to him. She was united with him mystically within her soul. And he called her through that experience to always turn to him within her heart and to build a sort of cell within her heart. Because then eventually after those 3 years she went out into the world. And yet she could continually turn to Jesus within her heart and find consolation and peace. When she went out into the world, she was recognized for her just incredible holiness. And so people would come from all over to seek advice from her, and she had this sort of band of followers who she would guide closer to Christ, closer to God. And among them would be nobles, royalty, would be even priests and religious who would come to her for advice. She wrote letters to queens and she wrote letters to the Pope. But in her time, she was an incredibly influential figure. She actually reconciled nations. She brought the Pope to come back to Rome. The Pope had for a long period been staying in France, kind of out of fear, and had been abandoning his responsibilities, really his post. And St. Catherine brought the Pope back to Rome. She was an incredible example of holiness. She died at the age of 33. When we look at the life of someone like St. Catherine, we can see how integral the interior life is for our exterior actions. How essential our interior life is for our apostolic life, our living the faith in the world. St. Catherine was so influential in her culture and in her time in the church because of her deep union with Christ, because of her spiritual life. And so I think it's so important that we always remember that the spiritual life is so central, that our friendship with God is so essential. And so I invite you in any way you can to prioritize your spiritual life. You know, we are pulled in all kinds of directions. You have all kinds of responsibilities that you have to take on, perhaps. Perhaps in this time you feel some isolation. Wherever you're at, I encourage you to make that time for the Lord, to spend time in quiet prayer with our Lord and trust that He will use that and bring about great transformation, just like He brought in the life of St. Catherine.